This channel, sustained by the unwavering interest of our subscribers and viewers, delves into the details of widely celebrated classics in the humanities. Your subscription, likes, notification settings, and support are a great source of strength for the operator's content creation. Hello. Today, we will take the time to think deeply about The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. Every man, in his youth, has had a time when he was a Werther. At least in spirit, short of committing suicide. At least, I was. Whether I am living well now, I'm sorry, I digress with my somewhat dramatic nonsense. Anyway, The Sorrows of Young Werther, German Die Leiden des jungen Werthers, is a novel published in 1774 by the German author Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and it is considered one of the most important works in German literature. This work was Goethe's first major success, gaining enormous popularity throughout Europe at the time, and subsequently triggering a social phenomenon known as the Werther Effect. From this point, let's briefly examine the work's main themes, structure, characters, and literary significance. 1. Background and historical context of the work. The Sorrows of Young Werther reflects the social and cultural backdrop of late 18th century Germany. This era, influenced by the Enlightenment, saw the rise of individualism and emotionalism sensibility. In Germany, especially, literary and philosophical innovation was actively taking place. Within this tide of the times, Goethe explored the emotional interior of the individual, contrasting the social norms of the day with personal feelings through the protagonist, Werther. 2. Main content. The Sorrows of Young Werther is a novel about the first love of a young man, Werther, and the tragic consequences that follow. The novel is composed in epistolary form, with the story unfolding through letters Werther sends to his friend, Wilhelm. Werther travels to a rural village to discover himself in a new environment, where he falls in love with the beautiful Charlotte. However, Charlotte is already engaged to another man. Werther tries to suppress his feelings but ultimately cannot accept the reality that his love for Charlotte is impossible, leading him to make a tragic choice. Main plot summary of The Sorrows of Young Werther. The Sorrows of Young Werther unfolds mostly in the form of letters the protagonist, Werther, sends to his friend, Wilhelm. Encounter and love with Lot. Werther, a sensitive young artist, leaves his hometown and moves to the country village of Walheim to take up a position at the embassy. One day, while on his way to a ball, Werther meets the beautiful young woman, Charlotte S. Lot. Werther is deeply moved by Charlotte, who is dedicatedly caring for her younger siblings in place of their deceased mother, and he falls in love with her at first sight. However, Charlotte is already engaged to Albert, an earnest and rational young man. Werther spends a lot of time with Charlotte and Albert, deepening his love for her. But her engagement remains unchanged. Werther is plunged into deep agony due to his impossible love for Charlotte. Werther's wandering and frustration, unable to endure the advice of others and his painful relationship with Charlotte, Werther leaves her side and begins working in a public service role at an embassy in another city. Werther struggles to adapt to the rigid aristocratic society and formal life of the embassy, eventually resigning his post and wandering again. Unable to forget Charlotte, he returns to Walheim, even after hearing the news that she has married Albert. Despair and tragic end. In the reality of Charlotte and Albert being a married couple, Werther suffers even more extreme despair and agony. He passionately professes his love and kisses Charlotte, but she is flustered, rejects him, and earnestly asks him not to visit again. Werther determines that he cannot escape the suffering caused by his impossible love for Charlotte and his social frustration, and he decides to commit suicide. He asks Albert to lend him 2 pistols, under the pretense of preparing for a journey. Charlotte sends the pistols with a heavy heart, and Werther attempts suicide by shooting himself in the head with one of them. He does not die immediately but is discovered the next morning, succumbing to his wounds 12 hours later. Neither Albert nor Charlotte attended his funeral. The novel concludes with Werther being buried under 2 lime trees, as he wished, without the presence of a clergyman. 3. Analysis of main characters. Werther, the protagonist, a young man with a highly emotional and artistic temperament. He values the depth of emotion and is not afraid to express his feelings honestly. His internal conflict and emotional suffering form the core of the work. Charlotte Lotte, the woman Werther loves, possessing a kind and beautiful nature. She receives Werther's love but is already engaged to another man, becoming the source of Werther's emotional agony. Albert, Charlotte's fiancé, a stable and rational character. He contrasts his reason and sensibility with Werther's through their conflict. 4. Main themes and symbols. Love and tragedy. This novel deeply explores the tragic aspect of love. Werther's love is depicted as an ideal, impossible love, which ultimately leads to his tragic end. Self and identity. Werther's conflict demonstrates the clash between the individual's self and social identity. He attempts to follow his emotions, but faces a crisis of identity as he confronts social norms and reality. Nature and sensibility. Nature appears as an important backdrop, reflecting Werther's emotional state. Communion with nature is a crucial element in shaping his emotional world. 5. Literary significance. The Sorrows of Young Werther marks a significant turning point in the literature of sensibility and romanticism. Through this work, Goethe deeply explored human emotion and the inner world, emphasizing the importance of individualism and emotion in literature. The novel's epistolary form and the honest expression of emotion profoundly moved readers, greatly influencing subsequent literary works. 6. The Werther Effect. Following the novel's publication, many readers empathized with Werther's tragic choice, some even attempting suicide themselves. This gave rise to the term Werther Effect, symbolically illustrating the psychological impact a work of literature can have on society. Now, let me conclude. The Sorrows of Young Werther explores the depth of human existence through the conflict between individual emotion and social norms. Werther's suffering is more than just the pain of a broken heart. It symbolically represents the frustration and passion of a young intellectual oppressed by the norms and conventions of the time, as well as the yearning for individual liberation. Goethe left a powerful impression on readers through his emotional and romantic approach, and this work continues to offer deep emotion and lessons today. This novel is considered the representative work of the Sturm und Drang storm and stress literary movement, which rebelled against the reason-centered values of the Enlightenment and emphasized emotion and the individual's free feelings. It remains an important milestone in the literature of sensibility and romanticism, and is the subject of important discussion and research in modern literature. Your subscription, likes, notification settings, and support are a great source of strength for the operator's content creation. Thank you for watching.